There's a kind of loneliness nobody talks about. It's not the loneliness of living alone. It's not the loneliness of losing someone. It's the loneliness of sitting at a dinner table with your own family and realizing nobody has looked you in the eye the entire meal. My name is Mariah Johnson. I'm 64 years old. I was a trauma nurse in Charleston, South Carolina for 38 years. I held the hands of strangers as they died. I delivered babies in elevators when we couldn't make it to the maternity floor. I watched a young man come back from a flatline on a Tuesday afternoon and walk out of my hospital on a Friday, thanking God and holding his daughter. I know what it means to save a life, and I know now what it means to slowly lose your own. Not to illness, not to an accident, but to the quiet, patient erosion of being loved less and less each day by the people you'd have died for. I'm sitting in my kitchen right now. It's 4 a.m. The coffee in my cup has gone cold because I forgot I made it. On the refrigerator, there's a wedding photo. Mine, from 1983. Me and my Elijah, both of us so young we barely look like the people we became. My daughter-in-law has moved that photo 3 times this month. Each time a little lower. Each time a little farther from eye level. I haven't said a word about it. That's part of what I'm going to tell you. I wasn't hit. I wasn't cursed at. I wasn't thrown out onto the street. What happened to me was worse than any of those things. I was made invisible in the house my own money helped to buy. So let me tell you how it started. Not the day I left. I'll get to that. But the first morning I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. That's where this story really begins. The year was 2016. I want you to picture it with me, because you need to know what I had before you understand what I lost. Our house sat at 4217 Magnolia Street in Charleston. It was painted a soft sage green, the color of spring leaves right before they darken into summer. Elijah and I had saved for 15 years to buy it. 15 years of taking the long way home so I wouldn't have to drive past houses I couldn't afford. 15 years of Elijah preaching at 2 churches on Sunday, his own small congregation in the morning, and a second service across town in the afternoon, where they paid him an extra $150 a week. 15 years of me picking up every overtime shift the hospital would give me, coming home with feet so swollen Elijah had to unlace my shoes for me. And then in 1994, we signed the papers. I remember walking into that house for the first time, just the 2 of us. It was empty, our footsteps echoed. Elijah put his hand on the doorframe of what would become our bedroom, and he said, "Mariah, baby, we're going to die in this house. Old and gray and grateful." That was the plan. Let me tell you about the mornings in that house, because the mornings are what I miss most. I'd wake up at 5:30, before the sun. I'd walk down the hallway, bare feet on the hardwood floor Elijah had refinished himself one summer. I'd pass the framed pictures of our children on the wall. Darnell at his college graduation from Morehouse, Jasmine at her nursing pinning ceremony. Both of them looking so proud of themselves I wanted to cry every time I walked by. I'd get to the kitchen and I'd put on the coffee. Not pods, not instant. Real coffee. Cafe Bustelo, the way my mother taught me, with a pinch of cinnamon in the grounds. Then I'd start the cornbread. My mother's recipe. Her mother's before that. Buttermilk, cornmeal, a little sugar, a little bacon grease for the cast iron pan. The same cast iron pan my grandmother gave me the week before my wedding. It was black and smooth as glass from 100 years of love poured into it. The smell of that cornbread baking. You remember what your grandmother's kitchen smelled like on a Sunday morning? That's what my whole house smelled like, every day. Elijah would come out of the bedroom in his robe. He'd pour his own coffee. He'd sit at the kitchen table with his Bible open, reading scripture aloud in that slow, deep preacher's voice. Sometimes he'd look up at me and say, "Listen to this one, baby," and he'd read me a verse, and we'd talk about it while the cornbread baked. Outside the kitchen window was my garden. Tomatoes in the summer, collard greens in the fall, fresh mint year-round because I used it for everything. Tea, lemonade, even in my greens when I was feeling fancy. I had a stone bird bath in the middle of it that Elijah had hauled home from an estate sale because I'd mentioned in passing that I thought it was pretty. On the back porch, there was a rocking chair. I want you to remember this chair. It was solid walnut, handmade, a wedding gift from Elijah's grandmother back in 1983. She'd saved for it for 2 years. She said, "Every black woman needs a chair of her own, a place where nobody can tell her to get up." I rocked both my babies to sleep in that chair. I prayed in that chair. After Elijah died, I slept in that chair 3 nights in a row because I couldn't bear to go back into our bedroom alone. Inside the living room, on a wooden shelf that Elijah built with his own hands, sat his record collection. Hundreds of albums, most of them blues and jazz, a few gospel, a few old Motown. His favorite was Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Cole Porter Songbook. He'd play it on Saturday evenings, and if I was in the kitchen cooking, he'd come up behind me and put his hands on my waist, and we'd slow dance right there in front of the stove. He was a Baptist preacher, 6'2", with hands like catcher's mitts, and that man could dance. On the nightstand in our bedroom, there was a small wooden jewelry box. Inside it was a strand of pearls. Elijah had given them to me on our 25th anniversary. He'd saved for 2 years, I found out later, from his sister, taking on extra funerals and weddings to put aside the money. The morning of our anniversary, he'd set the box on the kitchen table next to my coffee. No card, no wrapping, just a note in his slanted handwriting. For the 25 years you've carried me, now I want to carry something for you. I wore those pearls to church every Sunday for 7 years. I was going to be buried in them. And in the recipe box on the kitchen counter, a tin box painted with faded roses, left to me by my great-grandmother who was born enslaved and died free, was a handwritten recipe card that said, in her looping cursive, sweet potato pie, 4 generations, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every funeral, every revival, every baby shower, every homecoming for 30 years I baked that pie. My children were raised on it. My grandchildren would be too. That was the promise I made to myself. That was my world. A sage green house on Magnolia Street, a garden with mint and tomatoes, a walnut rocking chair on the back porch, Ella Fitzgerald on Saturday nights, pearls in a wooden box, sweet potato pie that tasted like my great-grandmother's hands. I had earned all of it, every square inch. And then, on a Thursday morning in April of 2018, Elijah sat down at the kitchen table with his coffee and his Bible, and he never got up. The paramedics said it was a massive stroke. They said he didn't suffer. They said it was the way every good preacher wants to go, with the Word open in front of him. I held his hand while we waited for the ambulance. It was still warm. I kept thinking if I hold on tight enough, I can keep the warmth from leaving. Of course I couldn't. But for 20 minutes, I tried. At the funeral, Darnell, my oldest, 30 at the time, held me up when my knees gave out at the graveside. He whispered into my hair, "Mama, I've got you. You're never going to be alone. I promise you that. On everything Daddy taught me, I promise." Brianna stood behind him. She had her hand on his shoulder. She was wearing a black dress and a perfect sad smile. She reached out and touched my arm and said, "Mom, we're your family. Whatever you need. Whatever. You just say the word." Jasmine was on my other side, sobbing so hard she was shaking. She'd flown in from Atlanta the night before. She kept saying, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," like a little girl, and I kept squeezing her hand because I didn't have any words left in me. I believed them, all of them. Why wouldn't I? For 2 years after Elijah died, I lived in that sage green house alone. Gloria Patterson, my best friend of 40 years who lived 3 doors down, came over every Sunday after church. We'd sit on the back porch in the rocking chair and the porch swing, and we'd drink sweet tea, and sometimes we'd talk, and sometimes we wouldn't. Gloria had lost her own husband, Clarence, back in 2012. She understood the kind of quiet that settles into a house after a good man is gone. It was hard. I won't lie to you. The first Christmas without Elijah, I couldn't bring myself to put up the tree. The second Christmas I did, and I cried the whole time I was decorating it. But I was living. I was whole. I was still Mariah Johnson, trauma nurse, mother of 2, wife of the late Reverend Elijah Johnson, member of St. Paul's Baptist Church, owner of a sage green house at 4217 Magnolia Street. I knew who I was. And then, in the summer of 2020, Darnell and Brianna drove down from Atlanta for the 4th of July weekend. They brought the grandbabies, Zuri, who was 3 years old at the time, all curls and big brown eyes, and Kamari, who was still a baby, 6 months old, the spitting image of my Elijah. On Sunday afternoon after church, Brianna laid a set of architectural drawings out on my kitchen table. Darnell stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, not quite meeting my eyes. "Mom," Brianna said, her voice soft and careful, "we've been talking. We want you to come live with us." I looked at the drawings. It was a beautiful house. A 2-story colonial in a good neighborhood in the suburbs north of Atlanta. The kind of neighborhood with a gate and a pool. We've got a whole mother-in-law suite planned for you on the lower level, Brianna continued. Your own bedroom, your own bathroom, your own sitting area. Private entrance if you want it. You'd have your privacy, but you'd have us too. And the grandbabies. Darnell finally looked up. Mama, I promised Daddy I'd take care of you. I don't want you rattling around alone in this big house anymore. Sell it. Put the money into the new house. Your name will be on everything. You'll be secure for the rest of your life. Brianna reached across the table and took my hand. Her hand was cool and smooth, manicured. She smelled like expensive perfume, something with jasmine in it. Mom, she said, the grandbabies need their grandma. And you? Lord, after everything you've done for this family, you deserve to rest. Let us take care of you for a change. I looked out the kitchen window at my garden. The tomatoes were just coming in. The mint was going crazy, like it always did in July. I looked at the doorway to the back porch where the walnut rocking chair was waiting. I looked at the hall where the pictures of my babies hung. And then I looked at 3-year-old Zuri, who was sitting on the kitchen floor, playing with a measuring cup I'd given her. She looked up at me and said, Grandma, come play. I put my house on the market 3 weeks later. It sold in 9 days, $485,000. I gave every penny of it to Darnell to invest in the new house. My name, he assured me, would be on the deed. The lawyer was handling it. It was just a formality. I packed up 57 years of my life into cardboard boxes. The rocking chair, the record collection, the pearls, the recipe box, the cast iron pan. The morning I drove out of Charleston for the last time, Gloria Patterson stood on her front porch and waved at me until my car turned the corner. I could see her in my rearview mirror, a small, straight-backed woman in a blue housecoat, getting smaller and smaller until she disappeared. I didn't know it then, but I was waving goodbye to the last person who called me by my real name for a very long time. 6 months after I moved to Atlanta, I asked Darnell about the deed. It was a Saturday morning. I was in his kitchen making cornbread. Brianna was at yoga. The kids were watching cartoons in the den. Darnell, baby, I said, not looking up from the cast iron pan. I never did see those papers for the house, the deed. You said the lawyer was getting them drawn up. He was drinking coffee, leaning against the counter. He didn't say anything for a second. Then he said, Oh, yeah. Mama, the lawyer's still working on it. It's complicated because of the way the mortgage is structured, but don't you worry about it. This house is as much yours as ours. You know that. I looked up at him. He smiled at me, the same smile he'd had when he was 8 years old and he'd broken my good china pitcher and tried to tell me the dog did it. I should have known, right then, but I didn't want to know. That's the truth. I didn't want to know. So I said, Okay, baby, and I turned back to my cornbread. That was the first lie I told myself in that house. It would not be the last. The first year wasn't bad. I want to be fair about that. The mother-in-law suite turned out to be a converted sitting room on the lower level. It had a window, but the window looked into the garage. No private entrance. I had to come up the back stairs through the laundry room to get anywhere in the house. No real kitchen, just a mini fridge and a microwave on a little rolling cart Brianna had picked up from Target. But Darnell had been clear. The suite would be added later, once the builder came back to finish the addition. By Christmas, Mama, he said. You'll have your own space by Christmas. So I waited. In the meantime, I made myself useful. That's what you do, isn't it? When you love people, you make yourself useful. I cooked. Every breakfast, every lunch, every dinner. I cooked for a family of 4, 6 days a week. On Sundays, Brianna would treat us to takeout from the fancy Mediterranean place on the corner. Brianna would come downstairs in her workout clothes, take one bite of whatever I'd made, and say, Mom, this is delicious. You should just stay in charge of the kitchen forever. Then she'd laugh like it was a joke. But I noticed she stopped cooking entirely after the 2nd month. I did the laundry. 4 people's laundry. Brianna had a lot of clothes. More clothes than I had owned in my whole life, I think. She would leave piles of them on the floor of the laundry room with handwritten notes. Delicates, hang dry, please. Or, Darnell's work shirts, light starch, please. I watched the grandbabies. Zuri went to preschool 3 mornings a week, and I did the drop-off and pick-up. Kamari was home with me the rest of the time. I bathed him. I fed him. I rocked him to sleep in the walnut rocking chair, which I'd put in the corner of my suite. Darnell was gone most days, up at 6, home at 7, sometimes later. He was a senior architect at a firm in Buckhead. Big projects, big money. He was doing well. Brianna worked from home, in marketing. I never quite understood what she did. She seemed to spend most of her time on video calls with her bedroom door closed and on Instagram. But she made good money. I knew that because she mentioned it frequently. At night, after the kids were asleep, Darnell would sometimes come downstairs and sit with me for a few minutes. He'd ask about my day. He'd tell me about his. Small things, light things. But he'd be there. And I'd feel for those 10 or 15 minutes like I still had my son. Christmas came. The mother-in-law suite didn't. Darnell apologized. The builder had gotten overbooked. The permits had taken longer than expected. We'd get to it in the spring. "Mama, is the room okay for now? Are you comfortable?" I said, "Of course, baby, I'm fine." I was. Mostly. In the second year, the comments started. They were so small. That's the thing I want you to understand. That's the thing that makes this kind of hurt so hard to name. Nobody was yelling at me. Nobody was slamming doors. Nobody was calling me names. It was just little things. "Mom, this stew is a little salty for the kids. Maybe next time less salt?" "Mom, I don't think the kids should eat so much fried food. Can we do more grilled stuff?" "Mom, I know you're used to doing it your way, but we really try to keep the kids off sugar. Could you skip the sweet tea at dinner?" "Mom, I noticed you left the kitchen a little messy last night. No big deal, just if you could wipe down the counters before you go to bed." Each one was reasonable. Each one by itself was nothing. A mother-in-law who took offense at any of those would be the unreasonable one, wouldn't she? But they added up. By the middle of the second year, I had stopped adding salt. I had stopped frying. I had stopped making sweet tea. I had stopped making cornbread. Brianna had said casually that all the carbs weren't great for the kids. I had stopped cooking the food I knew how to cook, the food my mother had taught me, the food I'd fed my own babies on. I was cooking Brianna's food now. Grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, brown rice. Healthy, bland, nothing like my kitchen had ever tasted. And one Saturday afternoon in the fall of 2022, I came upstairs to find the walnut rocking chair missing from the living room. I'd brought it up a few months before. Brianna had said, "Oh, Mom, why don't you bring it upstairs so the kids can use it too?" And I'd been touched by that. I'd thought, she's trying. She wants me to feel at home. "Darnell," I called out. "Where's my chair, baby?" Brianna came out of the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. She smiled that small, patient smile. "Oh, Mom, I put it in the basement. I hope that's okay. It's just, the living room is doing this whole modern farmhouse thing, and the chair is kind of dark. It didn't really go. You understand, right?" I stood there in the hallway, 42 years of sitting in that chair. 2 babies rocked to sleep in it. A husband who'd wrapped his arms around me in it while I cried the night my mother died. A grandmother on her deathbed telling me, every black woman needs a chair of her own. Didn't really go. I said, "Of course, honey, I understand." And I went back downstairs to my suite, and I sat on the edge of my bed, and I looked at the empty corner where the chair used to be, and I felt something, small, quiet, and cold, crack inside my chest. I didn't cry. I just sat there. For a long time. That night I ran a bath. I poured in the lavender bath salts Jasmine had sent me for my birthday. I got in. The water was hot. I closed my eyes. I stayed in that bathtub until the water went cold. Then I stayed longer. I was trying to feel something. Anger, sadness, anything. And I couldn't. I just felt tired. Tired all the way down to my bones. Finally I got out. I dried off. I went to bed. I didn't say a prayer that night. I'd said prayers every single night of my adult life since I was 19 years old. But that night, I didn't. I just turned out the light. That was the beginning. In the spring of 2023, Brianna had a garage sale. I didn't know about it until the morning of. I came upstairs to find strangers in my son's driveway, picking through boxes of stuff. Old toys, old clothes, old books, and Elijah's records. All of them. Hundreds of albums laid out on 2 folding tables. Ella Fitzgerald, John Coltrane, Mahalia Jackson, B.B. King, Aretha, Records Elijah had collected for 40 years. Records we'd slow danced to. Records that had played at my wedding, at our children's birthday parties, at the wake after his funeral, priced at $1 each. I walked up to Brianna, who was sitting in a lawn chair with a cash box in her lap. "Brianna," I said. My voice was very, very steady. "What is this?" She looked up. "Oh, Mom, I meant to tell you. I found all these old records in the basement when I was cleaning out last weekend. I figured they were just taking up space. We've got Spotify, you know. Nobody's going to listen to these." "Those were Elijah's." She blinked at me. Her face did something, a flicker of something that might have been realization or might have been annoyance. I've thought about that flicker a lot in the years since. I've never been able to decide what it was. "Oh," she said. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. They were in a box in the basement. I thought they were old junk. I'm really sorry." Behind her, a white man in a Braves cap was carrying away a stack of 10 albums under his arm. He was smiling. He'd found a bargain. Ella Fitzgerald was on the top of the stack. "It's okay," I said. Brianna reached out and squeezed my hand. "Mom, really, I'm so sorry. I should have asked. Next time I'll ask." "It's okay," I said again. I walked back into this house. I walked down the stairs to my suite. I closed the door. I sat down on the edge of my bed. And I didn't cry. That was when I knew something was wrong with me. Because 40 years of marriage had been inside those records. My husband's whole heart had been inside those records. And I'd watched them walk away in a stranger's arms. And I hadn't cried. I just sat there. I thought quietly to myself, "Mariah, what is happening to you?" And I didn't have an answer. Something changed in me after the garage sale. I didn't notice it at first. It was more like I started to disappear from myself, one small piece at a time. I stopped calling Gloria Patterson. That's not quite right. Gloria kept calling me. Every Sunday, like clockwork, my phone would ring around 2 in the afternoon. Sometimes I'd answer, sometimes I wouldn't. When I did answer, I'd keep it short. "I'm fine, Gloria, just busy with the grandbabies. I'll call you back." I never called her back. The truth is, I didn't have anything to tell her anymore. What would I say? "Gloria, today I made chicken the way Brianna likes it. Today I folded her laundry. Today I sat in my room for 4 hours because I didn't know what else to do." Gloria would have heard it in my voice, the way the life had started to leak out of me. And I didn't want her to hear it. I didn't want anyone to hear it. Because if nobody heard it, maybe it wasn't really happening. That's a lie a woman tells herself when she's drowning. If nobody sees me going under, maybe I'm not really going under. In the fall of 2024, I stopped going to church. Not all at once. First, I missed a Sunday because Zuri had a fever. Then I missed another because Brianna needed me to watch the kids while she went to a brunch. Then I missed one because I was just tired. I couldn't explain it. I just couldn't make my body get up and put on my Sunday dress and drive to a strange church full of strange people who didn't know me. Reverend Thomas Holloway, the pastor who'd taken over Elijah's congregation back in Charleston, called me once. He must have gotten my new number from Gloria. "Sister Mariah," he said in that warm, deep voice I remembered. "We miss you, sister. How are you holding up?" I told him I was fine. I told him I'd found a new church in Atlanta. I told him I'd been busy with family. All 3 of those things were lies. When we hung up, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall for a long time. The truth was, Brianna had said 6 months earlier, "Mom, why do you need to drive all the way back to Charleston for church? That's silly. Find one here. Or, you don't even have to go. Church is kind of an old-fashioned thing, don't you think?" Darnell had been in the room. He hadn't said anything. I think about that a lot. All the moments when Darnell didn't say anything. The silence of my son has been the loudest sound in my life for 5 years. In January of 2025, Zuri, who was 7 years old now, going on 8, came down to my suite one afternoon after school. She stood in my doorway, wearing her little pink backpack, with her hair done up in 2 puffs. "Miss Mariah?" she said. I looked up from the book I was reading. "What did you call me, baby?" She blinked. "Mommy said I should call you Miss Mariah. She said it's more respectful for grown-ups. She said calling you Grandma is too casual." My hands went cold. Zuri was standing there with her mouth a little open, waiting for me to tell her it was okay. She was a good child, a sweet child. She didn't want to get anything wrong. "Come here, baby," I said. She came over and sat next to me on the bed. I put my arm around her. "Zuri," I said, "you can call me whatever your mama tells you to call me." She looked up at me. "But what do you want me to call you, Miss Mariah?" My eyes filled up. I blinked hard, fast, so she wouldn't see. "I want you to call me whatever your mama says," I said. "You be a good girl and listen to your mama." She hugged me around the waist and said, "Okay." Then she ran back upstairs to watch her shows. I sat on the bed. I didn't move for a long time. That night, I didn't say my prayers. I hadn't said them in months. A week later, I opened my jewelry box to get out the pearls. The church, the new church I'd told Reverend Holloway I'd joined but hadn't, was having a Women's Day anniversary celebration. Gloria had been invited as a guest, and she was driving up from Charleston. She'd finally pinned me down and said, "Mariah, I'm coming to see you, and you're coming to church with me. No more excuses." I couldn't say no. I wanted to look nice. I wanted Gloria to see me and think, she's doing well. She's the same Mariah she always was. I wanted to pretend for one Sunday that I still was. So I opened the wooden jewelry box on my dresser. The velvet slot where the pearls had lived for 16 years was empty. I stood there with this box in my hands, and I turned the whole thing upside down on the dresser. Earrings, my old wedding ring, a little gold cross Jasmine had given me for Mother's Day. All of it tumbled out. No pearls. I went through every drawer, every jewelry pouch, every corner of my suite. I looked under the bed. I looked in the laundry basket. I looked in places that made no sense because by that point I was telling myself, "You're being silly, Mariah. You must have put them somewhere. You just forgot." After an hour, I went upstairs. Brianna was in the kitchen, chopping kale for a smoothie. Darnell was at the table, looking at something on his phone. "Brianna, baby," I said, "have you seen my pearls? The ones Elijah gave me?" She looked up. "Your pearls?" "The pearl necklace, in my jewelry box." She tilted her head. Her face did this thing, this careful, concerned thing. "Mom, I haven't been in your jewelry box. Why would I be in your jewelry box?" "I'm not saying you were, honey. I'm just asking if you might have seen them around. Maybe I took them off somewhere and forgot." Darnell looked up from his phone. "Mama, when's the last time you wore them?" "Christmas, a year ago." Brianna set down her knife. She walked around the island. She put her hand on my arm. "Mom," she said softly, is it possible you might have... You know, it's really common at your age to start misplacing things. I was just reading this article about... I didn't misplace them, Brianna. My voice came out sharper than I meant it to. Brianna pulled her hand back, just a little. Darnell set his phone face down on the table. "Mama," he said, "nobody's accusing you of anything. We're just trying to help you think through it." Brianna nodded. "Maybe we could schedule an appointment with your doctor, Mom, just to, get a baseline. There are some really good memory assessments these days." I looked at her. I looked at my son. I looked at my son's wife. And something happened very quickly inside my head. I can't explain it any better than this. A door that had been half open for 5 years quietly clicked shut. "You're right," I heard myself say. "I must have misplaced them. I'll look again." "We love you, Mom," Brianna said. I went back downstairs. 3 weeks later, I was scrolling through Brianna's Instagram. I did that sometimes. Scrolled through her pictures at night, looking at the grandbabies, looking at the life that was happening upstairs while I sat downstairs. It was how I kept myself in their lives. Brianna posted more pictures of my grandchildren than she ever sent me. I scrolled past a picture of her at a rooftop restaurant with her girlfriends. 3 women in cocktail dresses, holding up glasses of champagne, laughing. Brianna was wearing my pearls. I enlarged the photo with 2 fingers. There they were, 16 pearls, graduated from smaller to larger, with the little gold clasp shaped like a fleur-de-lis that Elijah had picked out himself. I knew every single pearl. I could have identified them in a lineup. The caption read, "Girls' Night borrowed from a family heirloom. Some pieces are just too pretty to leave in the box." 347 likes. I set the phone down on my nightstand, screen side down. I got up. I walked to the bathroom. I filled a glass with water from the tap. I drank the whole glass. I set the glass in the sink. I stood there, my hands on either side of the basin, and I looked at my face in the mirror. I didn't recognize her. The woman in the mirror had my cheekbones. She had my mother's mouth. She had the little mole above my right eyebrow that my daddy used to kiss when I was a little girl. But her eyes were gone. Somebody had turned the lights off behind them. I stood there, looking at her, and I said out loud, quietly, "Who are you?" And she didn't answer. It was a Tuesday morning in March of 2026, March 14th to be exact. I'll remember the date for the rest of my life, which I hope will be a long time yet. I woke up at 5:30, the way I always do. The house was quiet. Darnell was still in bed. Brianna was still in bed. The kids were still in bed. I went upstairs to the kitchen, and something was different. The coffee maker had been replaced. The one I'd been using for 5 years, a simple Mr. Coffee drip machine I'd brought with me from Charleston, was gone. In its place, on the counter, was a sleek, black, German-made espresso machine with a control panel that looked like the dashboard of a spaceship. A little card sat on top of it. From Santa, with love. It must have been a Christmas gift Brianna had gotten Darnell a few months before, but he'd just now moved it down. I stood there in my nightgown at 5:30 in the morning, and I looked at that machine. I didn't know how to use it. I tried. I pushed buttons. I opened little compartments. There was a slot for coffee beans, but no beans that I could see. There was a milk wand. There was a screen that kept flashing messages at me in German. For 10 minutes, I stood there pushing buttons on a machine I couldn't work, in a kitchen that wasn't mine, in a house my money had bought. Finally, I gave up. I opened the cabinet under the sink, all the way in the back, behind the cleaning supplies, where I'd hidden a small jar. Inside the jar was a little stash of Folgers instant coffee crystals. I'd been buying it in secret for 2 years. I'd been drinking it out of shame, alone, in the early mornings before anyone else got up. Because Brianna had said one evening when I'd been making a pot of regular coffee, "Oh, Mom, that stuff is so cheap. It's bad for your heart. Let me get you the good coffee. Ours." I'd stopped making coffee in the main kitchen after that. I'd gone back to drinking my own kind in secret, like a teenager sneaking cigarettes. I boiled some water in the microwave. I stirred in the crystals. I sat down at the kitchen table with my cup, and I looked out the kitchen window. There was no garden. There was no porch. There was no rocking chair. There was a stretch of perfectly manicured lawn behind a tall wooden privacy fence, a security camera on a pole. A lawn service came every Thursday to mow it. I had never, in 5 years, set foot on it. I took a sip of my coffee, and something in me, I don't know how else to say it, something in me sat up straight. I am 64 years old. I spent 38 years of my life as a nurse. I held the hands of strangers as they died. I set the broken bones of children. I gave CPR to a pregnant woman on the floor of a Piggly Wiggly in 1994, and both of them lived. I was married for 35 years to a man who built our life with his own 2 hands. I raised 2 children. I buried a husband. I put food on a table in a house I paid for every single night for 5 straight years. And I am sitting here at 5:30 in the morning in a kitchen where I've hidden my own coffee under the sink, drinking it out of a jar like a woman who is ashamed of her own mouth. My grandbaby calls me Miss Mariah. My son's wife wears my husband's pearls to a rooftop restaurant and calls them a family heirloom. My son told me 3 weeks ago that I might be losing my mind. And I said, "You're right." I set the cup down. I put my face in my hands. And I did not cry. I sat there, in the quiet, in the dim pre-dawn light, and I said, out loud to the empty kitchen, "I'm not angry at them." It was true. I wasn't. That's the thing I've never been able to explain to anyone who hasn't lived through it. I wasn't angry at Brianna. I wasn't angry at Darnell. I wasn't even angry at the woman who'd sold Elijah's records or bought a coffee maker I couldn't use or moved a wedding photo down the refrigerator inch by inch until it sat by the floor. I was angry at the woman in the mirror, the woman who had said, "Of course, honey," for 5 years, the woman who had hidden her coffee, the woman who had stopped praying, the woman who had let her husband's pearls walk out of the house on another woman's neck and had said nothing. Elijah, I thought, if you could see me now, you wouldn't know me, baby. You would walk right past me in the grocery store. And the worst part is, I don't know me either. I sat at that table for a long time. The sun came up. The sky turned pink, then gold. Upstairs, I heard Kamari start to stir. Little footsteps, a small voice calling for his mama. I got up. I rinsed my cup. I put it away. I went back down to my suite. I got dressed. I made my bed. And I waited. For what? I didn't know yet. But I was waiting for something. For the first time in 5 years, I was listening. For a knock, a sign, a word from God, anything. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, I picked Zuri up from school. She climbed into the back seat of the car in her pink uniform sweater, her 2 puffs a little messy from recess. She was carrying a big piece of construction paper, folded in half, covered in crayon. "Miss Mariah, look! I made something." "Let me see, baby." She unfolded the paper and held it up between the front seats. It was a crayon drawing. At the top, in her careful 8-year-old printing, it said My Family by Mariah Johnson. Below, she had drawn 4 figures. A tall man in a blue shirt, her daddy. A woman with long black hair and a red dress, her mommy. A little boy in green shorts, her brother, Kamari. A girl in a pink dress with 2 puffs, herself. And next to them, a big brown dog she had drawn with a smiley mouth and floppy ears. That was it. That was the whole family. I looked at the drawing for a long moment. "Zuri, baby," I said, keeping my voice very calm. "What about... Did the teacher say to draw everyone who lives with you?" I drew everybody. "And the dog?" "Well, we don't have a dog yet, Miss Mariah, but Mommy said we're getting one for my birthday." I pulled the car over. I put it in park. I turned around in my seat. "Zuri, sweetheart, what about me? Grandma? Don't I live there too?" She looked at her drawing. She frowned, just a little, the way children do when they're trying to be polite about something they don't quite understand. "Mommy said the teacher wanted us to draw our family, Miss Mariah. Not, people who stay with us." She said it kindly. She said it the way Brianna had said it to her. She didn't understand what she was saying, but I did. I looked at that child, my grandbaby, my son's oldest, the little girl I had rocked to sleep 100 times, bathed 300 times, read to every single night for 5 years, taught to tie her shoes, taught to pray before she stopped being allowed to pray. And I smiled at her. "Baby," I said, "your picture is beautiful. You did a beautiful job." "Thank you, Miss Mariah." She put the drawing back in her backpack. I turned around. I put the car in drive. I drove home. I did not cry. I did not cry because I knew if I started, I wasn't going to stop for a long time. And I couldn't start yet. Because I had something to do. I made Zuri a snack when we got home. I sat her down with her homework. I gave Kamari his juice box. I acted for 2 hours like a woman who was completely fine. Then, at 4:30 in the afternoon, while Brianna was on a conference call upstairs and the kids were watching TV, I went down to my suite. I closed the door. I walked over to the dresser. In the bottom drawer, underneath a stack of old nightgowns, was Elijah's worn brown leather Bible. I'd brought it with me from Charleston. I hadn't opened it in 4 years. I took it out. I set it on the bed. I opened the front cover. Tucked inside, between the cover and the first page of Genesis, was an envelope. White, sealed. My name written across the front in Elijah's slanted handwriting. Mariah. And below that, in smaller letters, "To be opened when you've forgotten who you are, my love." I stared at that envelope. I had known it was there for 8 years. Elijah had given me his Bible the night before he died. He'd handed it to me across the dinner table and said, "Baby, keep this for me tonight, would you? I left my reading glasses at the church and I need the big print one in the morning." He'd never gotten to the morning. I'd put his Bible in my dresser after the funeral. A week later, going through it, I'd found the envelope. I hadn't opened it. I'd told myself for 8 years that I wasn't ready, that I needed to save it, that I'd know when the time was right. The truth was simpler. The truth was, I was afraid of what he would say, because Elijah Johnson had known me better than I knew myself. And whatever he'd thought to write to me, whatever he'd been worried about, enough to sit down and write a letter for a future he wouldn't see, I was afraid it would be something I didn't want to hear. I sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in my lap. My hands were shaking. I turned the envelope over. I slid my finger under the seal, and I began to read. "My dearest Mariah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and something has happened that has made you lose your way. I don't know what it is. I hope I was wrong to write this at all. I hope you found this letter when you were 80 years old, happy and surrounded by grandbabies, and you laughed at me and said, "That silly old preacher, always worrying." But I don't think that's what happened. I know you, baby. I've known you since you were 22 years old in a white nurse's cap at Roper Hospital, and I know how you love. You love with your whole self. You love like you're pouring water out of a pitcher, tilting it more and more until there's nothing left inside. And I've watched you do it your whole life. For me. For Darnell. For Jasmine. For patients you'd only known for 3 hours. For strangers in the grocery store line. You have never, in all the years I've known you, learned how to keep a little water back in the pitcher for yourself. That's what I'm worried about. That's what this letter is for. Mariah, listen to me. I don't know what's happened. I don't know who's taken what, or who's said what, or why you're reading this letter and not living the life we planned. But I know this much. If you've gotten this far, it means you've already given away too much, and you need to stop. There's something I never told you about. In 2015, I bought a house. It's small. It's in Folly Beach, a little cedar shingle place 3 blocks from the ocean. It has a porch. It has a kitchen window that looks out toward the water. It has a little bedroom with yellow curtains that made me think of you when I saw it. I paid cash. It's in your name alone, your name only. I used money I had been setting aside for 20 years, a little bit from every wedding, every funeral, every revival I ever preached. I never told you about that money because I knew if I told you, you'd find some reason to give it away. There's also a savings account, in your name alone, with about $127,000 in it. Same story. 20 years of quiet setting aside. The house and the account are with Walter Beaumont. You remember Walter? We played chess every other Tuesday for 30 years. He's an attorney. He has the deed, the keys, the account papers. His number is written below. Mariah, hear me. The house is not a present. It's not a nest egg. It's not something for a rainy day. It's a door. It's a door I built for you 20 years ago, in case one day, someday, for some reason, you needed one. I hoped you'd never need it, but I built it just in case. Call Walter. Tell him I sent you. He'll know what to do. And Mariah, my love, my wife, the mother of my children, the best nurse that hospital ever had, the prettiest woman at every church dinner in Charleston, South Carolina for 40 years. Listen to me. There are some things people can take from you. Money, houses, pearls, records, rocking chairs. Years. But your soul, that's the one thing nobody can take. You can only give it. And baby, don't you ever give it away. Not for me, not for our children, not for anybody. Come back to yourself, Mariah. The door is waiting. All my love, forever and always. Your Elijah Walter Beaumont. 8435-554-127 Yan. I sat on the edge of the bed. I read the letter 3 times. And on the 3rd time, the dam broke. I cried like I had not cried since the morning they came to take Elijah's body away. I cried for 45 minutes. I cried for 8 years of holding it in. I cried for 5 years of course, honey. I cried for Zuri's drawing, and the pearls, and the records in a stranger's arms, and the rocking chair in the basement, and the woman in the mirror with the lights gone out behind her eyes. I cried for the part of me I had quietly buried in this house, piece by piece, believing every time that burying a little more was the price of being loved. I cried until I had nothing left to cry with. Then I got up. I washed my face in the bathroom sink. I patted it dry with a hand towel. I came back to the bed. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number. It rang twice. An old man's voice answered. Warm, steady, familiar, even after all these years. Beaumont? I took a deep breath. Walter, this is Mariah Johnson, Elijah's wife. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then very quietly, Sister Mariah, I've been waiting for your call for 8 years. How can I help you, honey? I closed my eyes. Walter, I said, I think I need to come home. 3 days later, I told Darnell and Brianna I was going to Charleston for the weekend. To visit Gloria, I said at Thursday night dinner. She's been asking me for months. I'm going to drive down Friday morning, come back Sunday night. Brianna looked up from her plate. Oh, okay. That's fine, Mom. Do you feel okay to drive that far by yourself? I've been driving that road for 40 years, Brianna. Something in my voice must have been different, because she blinked. She looked at Darnell. Darnell was looking at his plate. Well, Brianna said, recovering, That'll be nice for you. Tell Gloria we said hi. I said I would. Friday morning at 6 a.m., I put a small overnight bag in the trunk of my car. I pulled out of the driveway. I did not look back. 4.5 hours later, I was sitting in a leather chair across from Walter Beaumont in his office on Broad Street in Charleston. Walter was 67 years old. Tall, thin, with a neat gray mustache and eyes the color of coffee. He wore a navy suit and a tie the exact color of the ocean. He had been a federal prosecutor for 20 years before going into private practice. He had been Elijah's chess partner for 30 years, and their friendship had outlasted Elijah's life by 8. He poured me a cup of coffee from a silver thermos on his desk. Real coffee. Hot, strong, a little bit of cinnamon in it. He remembered. Sister Mariah, he said, settling into his chair across from me. I want to tell you something before we get to business. Is that all right? Of course, Walter. He folded his hands on the desk. Elijah Johnson was the best man I ever knew. I want you to hear that from me, in my own voice. He loved you more than I have ever seen a man love his wife. He used to come in here, to this office, and he'd sit in that very chair you're sitting in, and we'd play chess, and about half the time he'd lose because he was too busy telling me a story about something you'd done that week, something you'd said, a way the light had fallen on you in the kitchen. My eyes filled up. I set my coffee down. I have waited 8 years to see you walk through that door, Mariah, and I want you to know, whatever you need from me from this day forward, it is already done. You understand? I nodded. I couldn't speak. Walter reached into his desk drawer. He took out a wooden box, about the size of a dictionary, made of walnut, with brass hinges. He set it on the desk between us. Elijah gave me this box in 2017, he said, about a year before he passed. He told me to keep it in my safe. He told me only you could ever open it. Not Darnell, not Jasmine, not anybody from any court or bank or agency in this country. You, and only if you came to me yourself. He slid the box across the desk. My hands were trembling as I unlatched it. Inside, a set of keys on a leather key ring with a small wooden tag that said Folly Beach, 213 Driftwood Lane. A manila folder, thick, marked Deed and Transfer, M. Johnson. A bank book, old-fashioned, the kind they don't really make anymore. The cover said First Carolina Savings. Inside, in Elijah's handwriting, was an account number and a starting balance date from 1998. The current balance, printed on the last page by a teller 3 weeks before Elijah died, read $127,428.16. And underneath all of it, a second manila folder, thinner, marked with a small red stamp in the corner. Confidential. MJ only. I touched each thing, one at a time. I did not cry. Some feelings are too deep for crying. They just sit in your chest, large and still, like water in a bowl. Walter, I said, what's in this second folder? He looked at me for a long moment. His face was very gentle. His voice, when he spoke, was too. Mariah, he said, before you open that, I want you to know that you don't have to. Elijah's instructions were very specific. He said, let her open it if she wants to. Let her leave it closed if she'd rather. Either way is right. What is it, Walter? He took a long breath. In the spring of 2017, he said, Elijah came to me. He was worried. He'd had some conversations with Darnell that didn't sit right with him. He didn't want to accuse anybody of anything, but he called it just the facts, in case I don't get to see how this story ends. Walter paused. He hired a private investigator, a very good one, a retired FBI forensic accountant out of Atlanta. The investigator followed the money. He didn't touch your family. No surveillance, no interviews, nothing personal. He just pulled the public records and the court filings and the credit reports and put together a picture. I held the folder in my lap. What kind of picture, Walter? He was quiet for a moment. Mariah, he said, I'm going to tell you what's in that folder, and then you can read it yourself if you want to. In 2016 and 2017, Darnell came to Elijah 3 separate times and asked for substantial loans. $15,000 the first time, $22,000 the second, $35,000 the third. Each time, he told Elijah the money was for business investments, commercial real estate, some partnership he was getting into, nothing Elijah could verify. Elijah said no, I whispered. Elijah said no all 3 times. He told Darnell that a man who can't explain where money is going ought not to be borrowing it. But he never told you. He didn't want to put you in the middle. What was the money really for? Walter's face didn't move. Gambling debts, he said. Brianna's. She had a significant online gambling problem going back to about 2014. By the time Elijah hired the investigator, she owed just under $100,000 to various creditors. Some of them not the kind of people you want to owe money to. I closed my eyes. Darnell knew, I said. Darnell knew. And when I sold my house, the $485,000 I gave him, we can't prove what he did with all of it, Walter said quietly. But there are records in there of large payments that cleared her debts in the summer of 2020. Right around the time you moved in with them. I sat there for a long time. I was not crying. I was not shaking. I was doing something stranger. I was understanding. I was understanding that 5 years of my life had not been a misunderstanding. It had not been a clash of personalities. It had not been me being too sensitive, or them being too busy, or all of us just adjusting. It had been a plan. My son, the boy I had nursed at my own breast, the boy I had walked the floor with at 2 a.m. when he had the croup, the boy I had put through Morehouse on double shifts and overtime pay. My son had looked his mother in the face and lied to her and taken her money to pay off his wife's gambling debts. And then he had let his wife spend 5 years making her disappear, so nobody would ask questions about where her money had gone. I opened my eyes. Walter was watching me, very carefully. Mariah, he said, I want you to listen to me. You have options here. You can pursue this. There are civil claims, fraud, conversion, elder financial abuse. South Carolina has a statute specifically for what was done to you. I can have papers drawn up by Monday morning. I shook my head. No, Walter. He waited. I'm not going to sue my son. Mariah, I'm not going to do it. My voice was steady. I didn't recognize it, and I did. I'm going to do something harder than that. I'm going to walk out, and I'm going to leave him with the truth in his hands, and I'm going to let him decide what kind of man he's going to be from here on out. That's the only thing that's worth anything to me now. Walter nodded slowly. Can I have copies of everything? I said. The deed, the account, the investigator's report, the letter, all of it. They're yours. The originals stay in my safe. The copies are in a second folder in my drawer. I've had them ready for 8 years. He slid them across the desk. I put them in my bag. I stood up. Walter stood up too. He walked around the desk. He took both my hands. Sister Mariah, he said, welcome home. And that was the first time I cried since the letter. I drove to Gloria Patterson's house after I left Walter's office. She was sitting on her front porch. She must have been watching for me, because as soon as my car turned the corner onto her street, she stood up. I parked. I got out. She walked down the porch steps in her house slippers. She didn't say a word. She just opened her arms. I walked into them. We stood there, on the sidewalk in front of her house, 2 black women in our 60s, holding each other and crying without making any sound. The way women cry when the crying has been stored up for years. Finally, Gloria pulled back. She held my face in her hands. She looked at me. There you are, she said. There's my Mariah. I've been wondering where you went. Gloria, I said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry I disappeared. Baby, hush. You didn't disappear. You got lost. There's a difference. And you came back. That's all that matters. We went inside. She sat me down at her kitchen table. She poured me a glass of sweet tea and put a plate of peach cobbler in front of me. She had known somehow that I was coming, and she had baked peach cobbler that morning. We talked for 4 hours. I told her everything. About the coffee hidden under the sink, about the pearls, about Zuri's drawing, about the letter, about Walter and the folder and the gambling debts and the house on Folly Beach. Gloria listened without interrupting once. When I was finished, she took both my hands across the table. Mariah, she said, I'm going to tell you what my mama told me when Clarence's first wife tried to take him back in 1987. She said, baby, you cannot save somebody who is drowning you. You have got to get to shore and then decide if you can reach back for them. I nodded. You've been drowning for 5 years, baby. You get to shore, you get dry, you get your breath back. And then, and only then, you decide what you want to do about your son. Yes. And if the answer is nothing, that's a fine answer too. You don't owe him anything. You already gave him everything. I stayed at Gloria's that night. I slept in her guest room, in a queen-size bed with clean white sheets that smelled like lavender. It was the best sleep I had gotten in 5 years. In the morning, I went to St. Paul's Baptist Church. The 9 o'clock service was just starting. I walked in the side door, the way I always had when Elijah was the pastor there. I sat in the last pew on the left, my old pew, the one where I used to sit with Jasmine when she was little. Reverend Holloway was in the pulpit. He saw me walk in. He didn't stop his welcome. He didn't make a scene. He just nodded at me, a small, deep, knowing nod, the kind of nod that says, "I see you, sister. Welcome." I stayed for the whole service. At the end, when the benediction was done and people were milling around hugging each other, Reverend Holloway came down the center aisle. He walked straight to my pew. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat down next to me and put his hand on top of mine. "Sister Mariah," he said. "Reverend, the Lord has been asking about you." My eyes filled. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry, Reverend. I've been away from myself. The Lord knows where you've been. The Lord is not mad at you. The Lord is just glad you made it back." I nodded. I couldn't speak. "You stay as long as you like, sister. You come back next Sunday. You come back every Sunday. This pew is still yours." That afternoon, I drove out to Folly Beach. The address Elijah had written in the letter took me down a narrow street 3 blocks back from the ocean. Oak trees dripping with Spanish moss on both sides. The smell of salt and pluff mud in the air. Number 213 Driftwood Lane was a small cedar shingle cottage, painted, I almost laughed when I saw it, painted a soft sage green, the exact color of the house on Magnolia Street. Elijah had known. Of course Elijah had known. There was a wraparound porch. There was a kitchen window with yellow curtains that I could see even from the driveway. There was a little walkway made of oyster shells, crunching under my feet as I walked up to the front door. I put the key in the lock. The door opened. It was empty, clean. Bare wooden floors, white walls, the smell of the ocean drifting in through the windows. A small kitchen, a small bedroom, a small bathroom, a big living room with a window facing the water. I stood in the middle of the living room. I turned around slowly. I said out loud to the empty house, "Hello," and the house didn't answer, but it felt like it heard me. I stayed for an hour. I walked through every room. I sat on the kitchen counter and drank a bottle of water I'd brought with me. I stood on the porch and listened to the ocean. I drove back to Gloria's that night and slept in the guest room again. I drove back to Atlanta on Sunday evening. I pulled into Darnell and Brianna's driveway at 9 o'clock at night. The porch light was on. I could see the blue flicker of the television through the living room window. I took a breath. I got out of the car. I went inside. Brianna was on the couch in her pajamas, scrolling on her phone. Darnell was in the armchair, watching a Falcons game. "Hey, Mom," Brianna called without looking up. "How was Charleston?" "It was good," I said. "Where are the kids?" "Already in bed. Long weekend." I set my bag down by the stairs. I walked through the living room. I did not stop to chat. I went down to my suite. I closed the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed. Then I got up, and I walked to the closet, and I pulled out 2 suitcases. I started to pack. I was packing quietly, methodically, the way a nurse packs a trauma kit without hurry and without hesitation, when there was a soft knock on my door. "Mama?" Darnell's voice. "Come in, baby." He opened the door. He took 2 steps in. He saw the suitcases. He stopped. "Mama?" he said. What are you doing?" "I'm packing, Darnell." "Packing for what?" I folded a sweater, laid it in the suitcase. "I'm going home," I said. He stood there in this doorway. His mouth opened, his mouth closed. "Mama, this is your home." I looked up at him. For a long moment, I did not say anything. Then I walked over to the dresser. I picked up Elijah's letter, which I had placed there 3 days earlier. I walked back to Darnell. I put the letter in his hands. "Read this, son." He looked at the envelope. He saw his father's handwriting. His face went gray. "Sit down, Darnell." He sat, on the edge of the bed, his back to the headboard, his hands shaking a little as he unfolded the paper. He read. It took him about 5 minutes. I watched his face the entire time. I watched him get to the part about the house in Folly Beach. I watched him get to the part about the savings account. I watched him get to the part about, there are things people can take from you. But your soul, that's the one thing nobody can take. You can only give it. I watched my 38-year-old son's face crumple in on itself like wet paper. When he finished, he sat there with the letter in his lap. He was not breathing right. He was taking these small, shallow breaths, like a man who had just been punched in the stomach. "Mama," he whispered. "Darnell." Darnell, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to listen to me carefully. Can you do that for your mother?" He nodded. He couldn't speak. I pulled the chair from the corner. I sat down across from him, so our knees were almost touching. "I know about the money, son." His eyes closed. "I know about Brianna's debts. I know about the loans you asked your father for. I know what happened to the money from my house. I know all of it, Darnell. I have known since Friday." A single tear rolled down his face. He did not try to wipe it away. "I am not here to punish you," I said. "I am not going to sue you. I am not going to call the police. I am not going to ruin your career. I am not even going to tell Jasmine. Your sister is going to find out eventually, but not from me. That's for you to carry, in your own time." "Mama, I am so sorry." "I'm not finished, son." He nodded. He closed his mouth. I took his hands, both of them. I held them the way I used to hold them when he was 5 years old and afraid of a thunderstorm. "Darnell Elijah Johnson, listen to your mother. I loved you from the second I knew you were alive inside of me. I have never stopped loving you for one day in 38 years. I will not stop loving you tomorrow or the day after that. That is not something I can do. That is not something I will ever do." "Mama, but I cannot live in this house anymore. I cannot live in a house where my grandbaby calls me Miss Mariah. I cannot live in a house where my husband's pearls walk out on another woman's neck. I cannot live in a house where I hide my coffee under the sink." I squeezed his hands. "I am going to Folly Beach. I have a home there. Your father built it for me. He knew before I did." Darnell's face crumpled again. "Mama, please, please, we can fix this. I can fix this. I can make Brianna." "Son," I said gently, "you cannot make Brianna anything. That's not your job. Your job is to decide who you are going to be. Your father taught you how to be a man. Your wife has been teaching you how to be something else. I can't make that choice for you. But I can tell you this. Whatever you decide, I am your mother. My door is always open. My phone is always on. But I will not ever again live in a house where I have to hide in order to belong." He was crying openly now, soundless, the way his father used to cry. A big man weeping with his whole chest. "Mama, please don't leave tonight." "I am going to leave tomorrow morning, son. Early. I'm going to see my grandbabies before I go. I'm going to tell them I love them. And then I am going to drive to Charleston." I let go of his hands. I stood up. "Darnell, one more thing. Listen to me now." "Yes, Mama." "Your name is going on the deed of nothing of mine, ever again. My house in Folly Beach is in my name alone. My accounts are in my name alone. When I die, and I hope that is a long, long time from now, whatever is left will go half to you and half to your sister. That has always been my plan, and it remains my plan, but you will not touch it a day before I am gone. And if Brianna is still in your life at that time, you will inherit it through a trust that she cannot access. Walter Beaumont is drawing up the papers this week. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mama. I am not doing this to hurt you. I am doing this to protect what your father built. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mama." I bent down. I kissed the top of his head, the soft spot at the crown where I used to kiss him when he was a baby. "I love you, Darnell. That's never going to change, but I am going home." I walked him to the door of my suite. He stood there for a second, his father's letter still in his hand, his face wet. "Mama," he said, "can I keep this?" "Yes, son. That letter is for you now, too. You read it when you need to remember who your daddy raised you to be." He nodded. He walked up the stairs. I closed the door behind him. I finished packing. I did not sleep that night, but I was not unhappy. I was ready. Morning came. I was up at 5:30, the way I always am. I drank a cup of instant Folgers at the kitchen table for the last time. I said goodbye to the house in my head, quietly, without bitterness. At 7 a.m., I heard the kids getting up. I went upstairs. I made them scrambled eggs. I told Zuri her hair looked beautiful. I told Kamari I loved him more than all the stars. I hugged them both, long and hard, and I told them, Grandma loves you. Grandma is always going to love you, no matter what anybody tells you. You remember that? Do you hear me? Grandma loves you. Zuri said, I love you too, Miss Mariah. I smiled at her. You can call me Grandma, baby, if you want to. She looked at me, uncertain. It's okay, sweetheart, I said. It's always been okay. Brianna came down the stairs in her robe just as I was walking my suitcases to the front door. She saw them. She stopped. Mom, what's going on? I looked at her. For 5 years I had looked past this woman, around her, below her, never straight at her. I looked straight at her now. Brianna, I said, I'm going home. Her face did 7 different things in about 2 seconds. I watched them all. Home? Home where? Mom, what are you talking about? Did something happen? A lot of things happened, Brianna, over a long time. You know what they were. She opened her mouth. She closed it. Darnell came down the stairs behind her. He was dressed for work. His eyes were red. He did not look at his wife. I'm taking Mama to the airport, he said. The airport? She drove here. I'm driving her car back later. Jasmine is going to meet us at and right then the doorbell rang. I opened the front door. Jasmine was standing on the porch. She had a suitcase in her hand. Her eyes were red. She was wearing the gold cross necklace I'd given her for Mother's Day when she was 22 years old. Mama, she said. My heart stopped. Jasmine, baby, how did you... She put the suitcase down. She stepped inside. She walked past Brianna. She did not look at Brianna. She walked straight to me and she put her arms around me. Mama, she said into my hair. Gloria called me Friday night. She told me everything. I closed my eyes. Baby, Mama, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I have been trying to reach you for 3 years. Every time I called, Brianna answered. She always said you were sleeping. She always said you were tired. She always said you'd call me back. And you never did. And I thought maybe you were mad at me. I thought maybe you didn't want to talk to me. Jasmine, I never got any. I know, Mama, I know that now. Gloria told me. She pulled back. She looked at me. I took 2 weeks off work. I flew in last night. I'm coming with you, Mama. I'm driving you to Charleston. We're going home together. I looked at my daughter, my baby, my 32-year-old nurse practitioner, my Jasmine, and I understood finally the thing Elijah had tried to tell me in the letter. Your soul is the one thing nobody can take. You can only give it. And sometimes even when you have given it away. If you are lucky, if you are loved. If somebody somewhere has been praying for you even when you didn't know it. Somebody brings it back to you. 3 months later, Folly Beach, South Carolina. It's a Saturday morning in late June. The sun is coming up over the water. The ocean is the color of pewter turning slowly to gold. I'm 64 years old, and I'm standing barefoot in my own kitchen in a sage-green cottage 3 blocks from the beach. The kitchen window faces east. I can see a little strip of the Atlantic between the houses across the street. On the counter, a cast-iron pan, black and smooth as glass from 100 years of love. In it, a pan of cornbread, just coming out of the oven. Buttermilk, cornmeal, a pinch of sugar, a little bacon grease. My mother's recipe, her mother's before that. On the stove, a coffee pot, real coffee. Cafe Bustelo, with a pinch of cinnamon in the grounds. On the wooden shelf in the living room, a small collection of records. 19 of them. Jasmine found them for me on eBay, one by one, over the course of 2 months. They are not Elijah's originals, but they are the same albums. Ella Fitzgerald sings the Cole Porter songbook is on the record player right now. You'd Be So Nice to Come Home To is drifting through the house. On the back porch, a walnut rocking chair. Darnell drove it down from Atlanta himself 3 weeks after I left. He showed up at my front door with the chair in the back of his truck and a face full of tears. He stayed for 2 days. We talked. Some things got said. Some things got started. He has been in counseling for 11 weeks now. He calls me every Sunday. He and Brianna are separated. I don't know how that's going to end. I am not trying to manage it. That is not my job. Around my neck, a strand of freshwater pearls. Jasmine gave them to me 2 months ago. The old ones had memories, Mama. These are going to make new ones. She said it just like that. In the oven, alongside the cornbread, a sweet potato pie. 4 generations. Great-grandmother to grandmother to mother to me. The recipe card, tucked into the old tin box with the faded roses on it, sits open on the counter. The phone rings. I pick it up. It's Zuri. It's her turn at the Sunday call. Grandma? Hi, baby. Grandma, Daddy said we can come visit you in July. For 2 whole weeks. Can we come to the beach every day? Every single day, baby. Every single day. Grandma, I love you. I love you too, Zuri. She hangs up. Kids do that. They don't say goodbye. I set the phone down. I pour myself a cup of coffee. I carry it out to the back porch. I sit down in the walnut rocking chair. The ocean breeze comes up off the water. The Spanish moss moves in the oaks above the house. Gloria Patterson is coming over at noon. So is Reverend Holloway. So is Yvette Carter, the young nurse I mentored 20 years ago, who found me on Facebook as soon as I came back to Charleston and cried on the phone for 10 minutes before she could get a full sentence out. I have a house. I have a door that is my own. I have a garden, small, just getting started, with 3 tomato plants and a whole patch of mint going a little wild, the way mint always does. I have a daughter who calls me every night. I have a son who is trying to find his way back to himself, one Sunday at a time, and who may or may not make it, but who is at least trying, and who will always, always have a mother. I have myself. I take a sip of my coffee. It tastes right. I don't know when exactly I came back to myself. It wasn't the day I got the letter. It wasn't the day I sat in Walter's office. It wasn't the day I drove away from Atlanta with my daughter in the passenger seat. It was some morning, somewhere in the middle of all of that, when I wasn't paying attention, that I came home. I don't know when exactly I came back to myself, but one morning I woke up and the coffee tasted right again. And I knew.